How's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, so today pretty much everything has become content, hasn't it? Our breakfast, our opinions, and our grief. Even traditional knowledge or wisdom has been reduced to content, something to, post and to monetize. In other words, wisdom has been sucked into the algorithm and clipped into digestible bits and served up with background music, all to optimize for clicks and to make money from. Now, clearly, in many ways, this is a recent phenomenon given our online attention and performance economy. But yet still, it is something that has its roots in the past, I think. Very generally, you might say that wisdom became content as soon as it was packaged for consumption and not for real transformation and enlightenment. And I think we can see this, for example, as early as the sophists of ancient Greece. I mean, it was clearly their aim to turn ideas into a business. The sophists were, of course, these traveling teachers who charged enormous fees to teach subjects, most often to teach the art of persuasive speaking, with the promise of guaranteeing future success for their students in the courtroom or in politics. But the larger point with the sophists is that they weren't that concerned with the truth, and they turned wisdom into a service, something others could and should pay for. And actually, this is something that Socrates, who was around at the same time, this is something he railed against. You see, Socrates didn't charge money for teaching. Actually, his humility prevented him from considering himself a teacher. But he was deeply suspicious of those who did charge money for wisdom. And basically, that's because Socrates thought that accepting money corrupted the search for truth. He thought that if you were being paid to pass on your so-called expertise, like the sophists were doing, then you're more likely to tell people what they want to hear rather than what they should hear. You're incentivized to pander and to please and to flatter, not to provoke and to stimulate and to challenge. You see, for Socrates, philosophy was nothing like a commercial product or personalized content. No, it was about shared dialogue in the pursuit of the truth. And it was a way of life and a way to improve the health of the soul. And that he believed this is pretty clear from his behavior. I mean, he spent all of his time roaming the streets of Athens, engaging in dialogue, often annoying powerful people, not to make a living, but because he believed that the unexamined life was not worth living. He claimed ignorance rather than pretending to know. And most importantly, instead of monetizing wisdom, he gave it away entirely for free, even though it cost him everything, most crucially, his life. For him, teaching, even though he wouldn't call it that, teaching was a calling, not a business model. Suffice it to say, Socrates wouldn't have had a Patreon. So Socrates obviously had an issue with the sophists, but what would he think about what's going on today? I mean, as I mentioned at the outset, are we not in the age of monetization and grifters? Aren't we living in a time where anyone with a camera in their bedroom can hang their shingle and position themselves as a guru or a life coach or a philosopher, but for a price? And let's face it, what this really translates into, this economy of attention, is performance over substance. What happens is that knowledge becomes commodified and then packaged and sold as a kind of personal branding. To go back to what I was saying earlier, wisdom then becomes content. Teachers become merchants and peddlers. In other words, teaching, rather than being about the truth or about transformation, just becomes a means to an end, the end of monetization. And this whole thing just breeds more and more grifters, which is to say people who present themselves as educators and intellectuals, but who are ultimately just motivated by profit. Sure, they may sound fancy. They might borrow jargon from philosophy or from psychology or from spirituality, but their main goal in all of this is manifestly obvious. It's growing an audience and selling products and maximizing their revenue. Now, there's more than one danger here. First of all, there's just the obvious danger of bad information and half-truths and all-out lies. But a second danger is that the search for wisdom gets replaced by the appearance or the optics of wisdom. That's to say, people end up being pulled in and paying for performance, not insight, and they don't know it. Now, the word appearance is apt here, because to go back to the time of Socrates, this is exactly what Socrates and Plato accused the sophists of. The sophists were image makers, they said. They sold the image of wisdom. They were on the side of appearance and not on the side of reality. And here's the thing. Socrates was onto something important. Namely, truth and wisdom, that is on the opposite side of appearance. Because let's be real, truth has nothing to do with optics and brands and theater. Truth doesn't create illusions, it breaks them. And truth doesn't perform, it doesn't need to be optimized for engagement. And truth is not a product. It doesn't ask for money or followers or subscriptions. And truth doesn't sell certainty and absolutes. No, it practices humility and doubt and questioning. And lastly, wisdom. Well, that's something that is earned, not simply posted. It resists shortcuts. And that's because it's built on the crucible of sacrifice and education and contemplation and experience. And despite appearances, no content can compete with that. Bye for now.